In today's video, I'm looking at the difference between some of my Canon FD lenses and the Sony 24-70 G Master. Should be a fun comparison. Nothing too technical, no diagrams, no focus charts, nothing like that. Just a couple shots looking at the general kind of differences that, anybody could notice. And yeah, it's pretty cool. So let's take a look. So looking at the Sony G Master and the Canon FD at 50mm, this is probably like the closest shot that I got in terms of like matching composition. So this is like the greatest indication that we can take between the two and really kind of do a little bit of a deep dive and see like, okay, what exactly are we looking at here? Everything is the same on both cameras, both shot f2.8, 800 EI, the same white balance, just everything is the same. And on the left, this is the waveform for the Sony G Master. So looking at the waveform is like the scientific, like the most scientific I can be right now in this moment. And it's interesting to look at the two because on the left here is Sony G Master, and on the right here is the Canon FD. And what's interesting is that the FD has a little bit of this, what I assume to be a vignette, right? Because it starts to drop off towards the lower values here. So the edges of the frame are slightly darker than the G Masters are, which is kind of an interesting thing because it's not all that noticeable if you look at it. And I have noticed in my own work that the Canon FD actually has like a bit of swirling on the edges. Something that like the bokeh kind of starts to swirl, which is something that the G Master lens does not do. You can kind of see it towards the extremes here on this little bit of the wallpaper that exists back there, a little bit. It's not the best example of that, but it is there a little bit. Going back to the waveforms, the FD also appears to have slightly reduced contrast towards the middle. Not much, but we could take like this point right here, which I don't actually know what this is correlating to. It might be the end of Batman's cape. So if you look at the bottom of Batman's cape, I think that's what this point is representing. And that's a shadowy area. And on the GM side, the G Master side, it goes further down towards black than it does on the FD side. A slight 6 to 7 value difference here. And you can tell on the Batman figure itself that there is a bit reduced contrast. If you look towards the face, underneath the cape, underneath the gargoyle here, that there is indeed like a reduced contrast that is resulting as from the use of the FD lens. The other interesting thing that I've noticed is that on the wider focal lengths, the G Master seems to have a little bit more bokeh than the Canon FD did, But at the 50mm length, it actually appears that the FD has a little bit more bokeh. But they're both comparable. The bigger difference that I've noticed just in my time using them is that the bokeh of the Canon FD does kind of swirl, especially at the 50mm length. The FD also seems to have a little bit more warmth present. To my eye, it looks to be more green, but according to this waveform, there appears to be a little bit more red pushing. You can see there's a little bit of separation into this wallpaper back here, and it does appear to be a little bit what I thought was green, but maybe it's a little bit more red warmth to it than the G Master is displaying. A lot of my FD lenses are actually inherited. My grandfather had a good selection of FD lenses that he used to use for 35mm film photography, and I've gotten them, and so I kind of just wanted to make the most of them. And turns out with just this little Velo FD to Sony E-mount adapter, you can get a lot of value out of a lens that, in my case, I got for free, and this one in particular for $90. It's unbeatable. Like what am I gonna complain about? Like, it's fantastic for what you get, and they're a dime a dozen right now. You can get a bunch of these, all sorts of different focal lengths and apertures from eBay for like nothing. That's not to say that they're better than something like the 24-70. It really is, as with most decisions in filmmaking, totally a decision that must be made for your story, for your characters, for your production design. All of those things are way more important than the optical quality. There are a lot of people who deliberately destroy an image to serve a story that, doesn't need anything sharp. It really could just be your $90 lens, and that, if that helps your story, then this is the right lens for you. If you need, your autofocus and you need clean images because you're delivering to some sort of client, then you need something like this. And they don't exclude each other. They work in tandem to tell stories, and it's up to you to decide which ones are necessary for your story at any given moment. So, a fun comparison, but really it doesn't mean anything other than understanding what it is that I get from this lens and what it is that I get from this lens, and when something like that, something like this would be more beneficial to me than something like this. So all in all, a fun little comparison that doesn't mean much other than kind of understanding more of what it is that this lens actually yields against this lens, which I've never actually bothered to do before. I always just kind of liked what I was getting out of this, but I didn't really know what that was in comparison to this. But now I know, so I can kind of make more critical decisions about when it is an FD lens would be necessary over the 24-70.